So Dr. Emily Bance, who has a PhD and LPC, is an instructor in the clinical mental health counseling program in the College of Arts and Sciences at Bellevue University, which we learned is in Nebraska. So she facilitates both in-person and remote trainings to mental health providers and has worked in the mental health field for over 10 years. So her topic today is the ambiguity of mothering, how stepmother roles predict mental health outcomes. And I am very glad that I was actually assigned this to host because I think this topic is very interesting. So I am excited to hear what you have to say. So I will push it over to you. Dr. Bance, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Emily Bands, and today I'm going to be talking about the unique and often invisible emotional labor of stepmotherhood. Full disclosure, I am a stepmother, which is what interested me and drew me to this topic of research. Um, because the experience of stepmothers is under-researched and also very much misunderstood, I think, due to societal stigma and uh, a lot of just challenges and difficulties in stepmothers being able to navigate their role. So I'm going to look at and talk to you about some of the empirical data on role difficulty that stepmothers experience. And just kind of keeping in mind, um, if you are someone who is a biological parent and maybe a blended family experience, maybe you are a child who has a stepmother, maybe you are someone who is recently experiencing a separation and potentially might be having to co-parent in the future. I always ask participants to just keep an open mind because I do know that this topic can be challenging for folks who are in different experiences. But my goal in researching this topic and speaking about this topic is really just to shine a little bit of a light on stepmothers and their experiences. So that is the, lens that I'm coming from. So what I'm really going to focus on today is define that role ambiguity specifically in the stepmother context, and really focus on this tension between societal expectations around mothering as well as gatekeeping from biological parents, both the biological mother as well as the biological father. We're going to look a little bit at my research and the predictive relationship that I found between stepmother role difficulty and symptoms of depression and anxiety as measured by the questionnaire for couples and stepfamilies and the hospital anxiety and depression scale. And then we're going to look at some of these sub roles, um, specifically the role of spouse, the role of step parent, and the role of family, and which roles are statistically significant predictors of symptoms of depression and anxiety. So I'm going to start us off with a quote. And this is from a qualitative research study that was conducted by Weaver and Coleman back in 2005, where a few of the stepmothers who were interviewed in this study spoke about their experience of being a stepmother as it's sort of a mothering role, but you're not really their mother. And I picked this quote very intentionally because I really feel like it very much encompasses that role, that ambiguity that stepmothers experience in their blended family unit. So just to give a little bit of context, although the exact number of step parents in the US is unknown, there is a current trend where biological mothers and fathers are splitting custody of their children after a separation occurs. And this is historically and has been historically not the case. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. In the past, many more biological mothers were receiving full custody of their children, which meant that in the past, there hasn't been a lot of research on stepmother blended families because there haven't really been a lot of stepmother blended families. However, now that custody is trending more towards shared custody or 50-50 custody, or even fathers retaining full custody of their children, more research is being done on stepmother blended families just to increase the awareness of stepmothers' experiences in their family unit. So the literature has already established that in general, step parents also often face role ambiguity and confusion related to their roles in the family. And this ambiguity is often the result of several external and internal factors that create unique stress for the step parent, right? So, for example, unlike biological parents, step parents enter a family system where many roles and relationships are already established. And depending on when the stepmother enter or when the stepfather enters that blended family system, you might already have children taking on or older siblings taking on maybe some quote unquote parental like duties, right? In terms of maybe helping with homework or just kind of looking out for and taking care of their younger siblings if like a parent is at work. So not even thinking about um, the roles that are established from the original family unit before the dissolution of that original family unit, but even thinking about the established family roles between the biological father and the children when the children are with the father, as well as the specific roles when the biological mother has the children as well. So when a step parent is entering that unit, it can really be challenging for them to figure out where their place is and what types of roles they want to take on. Now, for stepmothers, it becomes a little bit more nuanced because stepmothers experience, and stepfathers experience this as well, but stepmothers experience gatekeeping as well as traditional gender roles in a different way than stepfathers. So, in regarding to parental gatekeeping, um, both biological parents will typically gatekeep roles because children often feel loyal to both of their parents, and both parents typically want to continue to participate in their already established parental roles. This translates specifically to stepmothers in the sense that oftentimes biological mothers will still feel a need and a desire to have a say in what is occurring in her ex-spouse's or ex-partner's household, even though she's no longer in that household. So she feels that as the mother, she should have a say over how and what is happening in that household, even though the biological father may not, want that or feel that that is the case. The biological mother may also feel, firm in her identity as mother, and will often be firm in her expectations around what responsibilities a stepmother can take on in the family unit. And this especially makes it difficult for stepmothers to define their position because stepmothers have to also tend to the tension between the parental gatekeeping and traditional gender roles. Okay. Society expects women to take on mothering type roles with their stepchildren. And there is this tension between how does a stepmother find a place in her family unit while juggling the expectations from the biological parents, as well as juggling the stigma that stepmothers often face, as well as juggling the societal expectation that as the woman in the relationship, the stepmother should be taking on traditional roles related to cleaning and cooking and taking care of the children. So all of this role ambiguity uh, really impacts the experience of stepmothers within their family unit. And as I said before, as more blended families with stepmothers has formed, research has focused more on stepmotherhood experiences. And research has found that stepmothers experience poorer mental health outcomes than biological parents, and stepfathers including more stress and symptoms of depression and anxiety. And then, in addition to that, dissatisfaction within the relationship also contributes to poor mental health and overall psychological well-being. So, if we look at our stepmother roles, um, these are different roles that a stepmother might participate in within her family unit, depending on which domain. And when we think about this, regardless of how long the stepmother has been in the child's life, there is this societal expectation, or even within the partnership between the stepmother and biological father, there are these expectations that stepmothers should be participating in roles in the family unit. If you're a parent, you might be looking at some of these roles yourself, and you might see that they sound familiar to you, because the reality is that when it comes to stepmotherhood and stepparenthood, step parents, specifically stepmothers, are going to be participating in similar roles to the biological mother and biological father. As I mentioned, I'm a stepmom. So when I'm at the store with my husband and when my stepson was much younger, if my stepson, for example, was acting out, people aren't looking at me and my husband and saying, oh, she's the stepmom, so he's the one who should be disciplining the child, or he's the one that should be stepping in to say something to the child. Society is seeing me as the mom. And then they're judging me or potentially judging me for not parenting and for not stepping in that situation. Or my husband is now being seen as, a great dad or a wonderful dad because he is the one that stepped in. Whereas again, as the woman in the relationship, I'm being judged because I'm, the mom. Um, the other aspect to kind of think about this, and this is where some of the role ambiguity and gatekeeping comes in for stepmoms, is when a step parent, stepmother, or stepfather is living with their child, um, there might be this gatekeeping that, the stepmom should not be participating in something like caregiving, or participating in something like mediating relationships between the child and maybe a sibling, or the child and their biological parent. But if I am home with my stepchildren, or a stepmother is home with their stepchildren, and the child is in danger, or the child is in need of emotional support, or needs help with the task, what is a step parent supposed to do in that situation? Should the expectation be that I wait until my husband gets home in order to navigate the situation? I think not, right? So, parental gatekeeping really creates a lot of tension and conflict for stepmothers because, stepmothers might want to step in and might be expected to step in certain situations, but the biological father might feel sad or disappointed that, they weren't the one to come home when their child was coming off the bus upset. Or the biological mother might feel upset that the stepmother was the one comforting the child if something happened, getting off the bus. And this is where that role ambiguity and confusion, can really come in because we have certain roles that the stepmother is experiencing and participating in that are going to have some level of ambiguity. So if you look at some of these, you might notice something like disciplining the stepchildren as being a place for ambiguity for a stepmother, right? Stepmothers feel that they should discipline and again might need to discipline. If my stepson is running around the house with a knife, for example, that's something I might need to ask him to take a timeout for, or maybe I might have to take away an electronic device. But in doing so, now I might fear or I might be labeled with the wicked stepmother stereotype for doing something like that. In terms of, um, coordinating events within the family, right? So the stepchild isn't going to lose their mother's family um, just because they're no longer, just because their parents are no longer in a relationship together. So for um, my experience, my husband continues to do a lot of coordination between his former in-laws and my stepson in order for my stepson to see them. But there is some ambiguity there for a stepmother who might be expected to kind of step in and navigate that coordination with former family members. There's no right or wrong way to handle those interactions. There's no right or wrong decorum to handle those interactions. And again, um, there's this overhanging stigma related to the stepmother, the wicked stepmother stereotype that really um, supports how a stepmother is going to react or um, respond to certain situations. So I'm not sure if you can see it as well, but I did sort of um, do a different background for some of the areas where stepmothers might face some more role ambiguity. And these are a lot of different roles. A lot of areas where a stepmother might feel confident, right? It might be natural for a stepmother to participate in more direct caregiving, or more boundary maintenance or conflict type resolution roles within the family unit. And it can often feel disheartening when a stepmother wants to participate in those type of roles, but is unable to, again, due to that gatekeeping. And this is where we come into that research and the established literature related to the role ambiguity and confusion contributing more to symptoms of depression and anxiety for stepmothers, which is what I actually focus my research on. So um, for me, for my research, I was looking at the role difficulty within those three domains of the role of spouse, the role of step parent, and those social family roles, and whether or not difficulty in those roles contributed to depression, symptoms of depression and anxiety. Just some quick demographics for my study. I had 92 stepmothers. They were all heterosexual couples. Most of them were between the ages of 30 and 39. Most of them were married. Over 50% were in a relationship for 5 or more years. And almost half, almost 47, almost 50% had 50-50 custody. I'm not going to get too much into the statistical analysis of what I found, but I did want to include it in the PowerPoint in case anybody was interested. But I really want to get into my findings. So, as I mentioned before, research really has shown that stepmothers experience significant role ambiguity and confusion in the family. And this is really often driven by those external factors like parental gatekeeping and pervasive societal expectations. We know that step parents experience role ambiguity and confusion in the family unit. We know that factors like parental gatekeeping and societal expectations fuel this confusion, and that stepmothers face stress, stigma, and symptoms of depression. And we also know that stepmothers are susceptible to poor mental health, including feeling devalued and experiencing symptoms of depression. My research did extend this knowledge because it did confirm this direct link. I did find that there is a significant relationship between the difficulties a stepmother experiences in these specific roles and the severity of her depression symptoms. And this was held true across all three role domains. So the social and family role, the role of spouse, and then the role of step parent, which each showed a relationship with depression. The findings for anxiety were actually a little bit, and interestingly enough, a little bit more nuanced. So the roles collectively were not a significant predictor, but the role of spouse and the role of stepmother did show individual significance, which suggests that high difficulty in specific relationships like that with their partner and that with their stepchild has an impact on anxiety, potentially reflecting struggles with decision making as well as societal stigma. So, my conclusions from this are that there is much more that can and should be done for stepmother mental health. Women mental health in general is incredibly important, but there are going to be more stepmothers in blended family symptoms. And in order for myself, as a licensed professional counselor here in New Jersey, as well as other therapists, in order for us to be able to support stepmothers in this experience, we really have to be mindful of their specific experience in the blended unit and what is potentially contributing to the symptoms of depression and anxiety they might be experiencing. In addition to all the other things in the world that contribute to a woman's symptoms of depression and anxiety, there is this additional layer that stepmothers face that is a little bit different and just a little bit more nuanced than a typical biological mother's experience. Stepmothers are going to have to continue to navigate these societal expectations, this parental gatekeeping, as well as the stigma and ambiguity of their role. You would think and you would hope that at this point in the year of 2026, that maybe stepmothers wouldn't experience so much stigma, but they do. Within the last couple of years, the second Enchanted movie came out, and the whole plot of the movie was based on Amy Adams' character becoming a wicked stepmother to her stepdaughter. And I think she tried to murder her in the movie, right? And it was a lovely ending because, the love of her stepchild saved her from the curse of becoming a wicked stepmother. But that type of portrayal in the media does continue to contribute to that stigma that stepmothers experience. And again, this stigma fuels this added pressure of on the stepmothers and their experience. And then just understanding this key finding that stepmothers' roles as well as their relationship satisfaction are significant predictors of depression. And when thinking specifically of the role of the spouse and the role of the step parent, it is a significant predictor of anxiety. So I know I blew through all of this information, but I wanted to be respectful of everybody's time and stay on time. But does anybody have any questions or any comments? I'd be happy to answer.
So, Dr. Bance, I don't see any questions in the comments here, but I just wanted to make a comment. I think I mentioned before that I thought this topic was really interesting, and I think that you pointed out something that I never really thought about, and so hopefully it'll get other people thinking as well of the different experience that a stepmother has versus a stepfather. And so all of those dynamics based on those gender roles and the typical parenting role for each of those, how much of a discrepancy it could be for biological parents, much less the step parent. So I think that's a very important key. Like even if people just take away that fact, to realize that there are differences and there's a very unique experience that stepmothers go through, I think it's very important. So I definitely want to thank you for bringing up the topic and talking about that.
Yeah, I think it was shocking for me when I was going through the research and really reading more on this topic as I was, going through my own step parent journey, to see the differences between what stepfathers experience and what stepmothers experience. And I think it actually really mirrors what men experience as parents as what women experience as
Hmm.
parents, right? Women are judged much harder than men, something that a man does as a parent, that a father does as a parent. As a society, we clap and we praise and we say, wow, he's such a great dad. And if the mother does the same thing, it's, oh, well, they should be doing that. They're the mother.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing for stepmoms.
So we do have two questions that popped up, so I'll let you answer whichever first. So
Yeah.
the first is any suggestions specifically on how therapists can support stepmothers who are struggling with these challenges? And then do you have any book recommendations on this topic?
Yeah. So in terms of suggestions for how to support a stepmother struggling with ambiguity, one of the best things that we as counselors and therapists can do is really validate their experience. It is st for a stepmother to talk about their feelings, and oftentimes negative feelings about their family, about their husband, about their kids. There's a lot of shame attached to that for a lot of stepmothers. In the same way, there's shame for mothers, right? When mothers aren't allowed to speak negatively about their children or their experiences. So being able to validate that for them is something that can often be just very powerful for stepmothers to just hear that their experience is valid and what they're feeling is valid. Beyond that, really supporting stepmothers to um, get to a place where they are kind of navigating an acceptance of their situation, because there are going to be certain things about their situation that they can't control, and supporting them to really focus on the things that they can control. So, if they're experiencing ambiguity around parenting practices, and maybe their husband is really the one who wants to do homework with the child, even though maybe they're feeling like that's strength on their end. Maybe there's a different activity that they can do with the child, so that the father still has that homework time, but maybe they're focusing on, baking or cooking together. So just kind of helping to support the stepmother to take control in her life where she can, because stepmothers often feel very powerless in their situation.
So in
Um,
closing, are there any book recommendations on this topic that you've seen that you would like to share?
Um, so unfortunately, no. And this is an area where there really does need to be more support for stepmothers. I think pulling from those typical mothering experiences and maybe pulling a little bit from that into the stepmother experience, and finding similarities is something that can be helpful. But unfortunately, I do not have any book recommendations on this topic. There's actually been some research done on self-help books for stepmothers specifically, and they're often not that helpful for stepmothers because they
Mhm.
don't really provide solutions and actual support for stepmothers to navigate this process. So I actually wouldn't recommend any books.
Do you have a way for people to follow you on social media or to reach out if they have any further
Yeah.
questions?
So you can email me at ebans@bellevue.edu. And I am on Instagram at along the collaborative path counseling. That's my at on Instagram, along the collaborative path counseling.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bance. We really appreciate it. Definitely good information. And I hope everyone found it helpful. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day. Take care.